Hey guys, today in this mechanical explanation video, we're going to take a look at one of my personal favorite mechanical concepts to coach, and that is achieving arm layback. So let's go ahead and get right into it here. So first we'll start off with what is arm layback. So arm layback is the mechanical position that occurs during the arm acceleration phase of the pitching delivery where the pitcher's throwing shoulder reaches maximal external rotation. So we're talking about the point in time between front foot strike and ball release where the pitcher's shoulder reaches the maximum range of external rotation that they're going to achieve. So with that being said, let's go ahead and take a look at a couple pro examples here on what exactly arm layback looks like. So the first guy we're going to take a look at is Luis Castillo. So let's go ahead and get him into what we consider the arm layback position. So right there, we'll go ahead and pause him. This is the position we're talking about when we refer to arm layback. So it occurs during the arm acceleration phase, which is essentially the phase of the delivery in between front foot strike and ball release. And we can see here that this is the maximum amount of shoulder external rotation that Luis is going to get in his delivery, which is 166 degrees. So we'll kind of talk about what the acceptable range of arm layback is during the next slide. But I just kind of want you to see a pro example here of Luis Castillo, and we can see here exactly what arm layback is. So we're gonna go ahead, we'll look at one more pro example here just quickly. And that is going to be Christian Javier. We'll get to him here in a second. So here we have Javier, and we'll get him in to his arm layback position. Here we can see again, maximum amount of shoulder external rotation that he's going to achieve during his delivery is right here, right in between front foot strike and ball release. And we can see here, this is exactly what arm layback is, and he's at 160 degrees of arm layback. So during the next slide, we're going to talk a little bit more about some of the ranges and some of the kind of the criteria to ultimately being able to achieve the level of arm layback that we see major leaguers achieve. So let's go ahead and do a little deep dive into the arm layback mechanical concept here. I want to just kind of discuss some different concepts that kind of go into achieving arm layback, and then we'll kind of talk about what the acceptable range of arm layback is within the delivery and kind of what we've observed with pros. So first thing that I really want to make sure that you guys understand, and I see this time and time again being coached the wrong way, is arm layback is not simply just shoulder external rotation. I'll see a lot of coaches say, well, automatically if you don't get arm layback, it's all because you don't have, you're not achieving enough shoulder external rotation. And now that may be the case that certain pitchers lack the range of motion for shoulder external rotation, but that is 100% not always the case. So that's one thing I want you guys to understand up front, is that arm layback and shoulder external rotation are not synonymous, and that there's actually a lot more things that go into achieving arm layback and being in this successful threshold or range than just shoulder external rotation. So arm layback is a combination of multiple movements coming together at once. And the main three are, first thing is T-spine extension or thoracic spine extension. That's going to be the first movement that ultimately is going to help us achieve or get within the acceptable range of arm layback. Second one is scapular posterior tilt. I'll touch on this here in a second with DeGrom and kind of what that is, but ultimately that's going to be your second one. And then lastly, you're going to have true shoulder external rotation. So those are kind of the main three. There's some other things that may contribute to being able to achieve arm layback into the acceptable range, but those are really the main three. And let's go ahead. And so acceptable range of arm layback is between 160 to 190 degrees. That's the range that we see pretty much all big leaguers in. And one point I just kind of want to make out to you guys, and I'll kind of just show you here, is a normal range of shoulder external rotation, or a healthy range, is 80 to 90 degrees. So if I stand here and I keep everything neutral in my body and I go as far back as possible without doing anything, that's about the furthest I can get right there, okay? That's about 90 degrees, right? Now, if I integrate thoracic spine extension and scapular posterior tilt in combination with shoulder external rotation, let's see what happens. So I'm gonna go into shoulder external rotation, and now what I'm gonna start to do is I'm gonna start to extend my spine, and I'm gonna start to posteriorly tilt, meaning tilt backwards my scapula. And I'll kind of show you guys in the next slide when we look at Jacob deGrom. So I'm at 90, now I start to expand my spine and posteriorly tilt my scapula, and now you can see where I can get. I got a lot more range there than just the 90 degrees. So just by doing that, you can see even being in a static position, how much more arm layback or external rotation of the shoulder that I'm able to achieve there. So I just kind of wanted to give you guys that just kind of example there. And I want you guys, kind of main takeaways I want you to understand here is that arm layback is not just simply shoulder external rotation. It's a combination of these three things, and then the acceptable range is between 160 to 190 degrees, and a normal range of shoulder ER is between 80 to 90 degrees. So we have about 80, 90 degrees or so that we need to get outside of shoulder external rotation in order to be in the acceptable range of arm layback. All right, guys, so let's take a look at another pro example here. Here we have Jacob deGrom. And what we're going to talk about with Jacob deGrom here is we're going to talk about the three movements that we discussed in the last slide in relation to deGrom. So we're going to look at each one of those movements, see if he's achieving each one of those movements, and see if it's contributing to his success with his arm layback. So we'll kind of get him going here. First, we'll verify what kind of arm layback he's able to achieve. So boom, we can see there that deGrom is getting 174 degrees of arm layback. So a little bit more than the pro examples we looked at, our first two pro examples with Javier and Castillo. So we can see there he's able to get 174 degrees. And we'll kind of look into here in this next time we see him throw. We're gonna pause him at the same position. Okay, so we're gonna get him right here. Remember, so he's at 174 degrees, right? So what were the three things that we discussed? We talked about thoracic spine extension being one movement that contributes into arm layback. We talked about scapular posterior tilt, and then we talked about true shoulder external rotation. So obviously we know he's getting true shoulder external rotation. That's the movement where the shoulder is rotating the arm backwards like this. We obviously can tell he's getting that. That's pretty obvious. I don't think anybody would argue that. So we'll just go ahead and write down ER. We'll write a check for that. We know he's getting that. So second one, let's go ahead and look at we'll look at the T-spine. And so what do we see? And when we talk about T-spine extension, ultimately T-spine extension is the central part of the spine essentially extending in this manner, right? So do we see, and it's kind of the arching of the back, if you will. So if we look at deGrom's back here, we can clearly see that there's an arch there, right? And that's pretty indicative of the fact that he is ultimately achieving thoracic spine extension. So we would say number two, we would say that that's a check for him. And then last thing we'll take a look at is the third one, which is scapular posterior tilt. So ultimately it's the scapula being tilted backwards, if you will. And I'll kind of put some different examples up of what that is exactly, but I just kind of want you guys to get a basic understanding that this is what contributes to this. So then three, we would say scapular posterior tilt. I'll just write scap. And what do we see here? So we can see that his scapula is tilted like that. It's not neutral, and it's definitely not anterior tilted. So we can see that he has posterior tilt there with the scapula, which is going to help him contribute into getting that 170 degrees of arm layback that we see getting here. So we'll kind of take a look at a couple different things here as we continue on the presentation. But I definitely want you guys to understand that there are three main movements that go into achieving shoulder external rotation, which are the three we just covered: shoulder external rotation, T-spine extension, and scapular posterior tilt. So we'll go ahead and continue on with the presentation here. I just wanted to give you guys another pro example when looking at these three movements that contribute into being able to achieve arm layback. All right, so next I wanted to talk about some of the mobility and soft tissue work that we need to do in order to help players that aren't achieving that 160 to 190 degree range of arm layback. Some of the mobility and soft tissue work that we need those players to be doing. So first things first, pec major, pec minor, tissue quality and mobilization. So first off, the pec major and pec minor. The pec minor is the small muscle in your chest that's essentially kind of down here. And then you have the larger portion of the chest, which is the pec major. So essentially when we talk about tissue quality, we're talking about myofascial rolling. So like getting a lacrosse ball, getting against a kind of a hard surface and rolling the tissue out and rolling that ball over. And ultimately what that's gonna do is that's gonna help improve the tissue quality, which is gonna help with range of motion and some other things as well. Then we have mobilization. So what are we talking about there? We'll do some of our scap pass-through exercises that are really good for mobilizing the chest. We'll do like a pec pails and rails stretch. So just a few different things that will integrate into our program that will ultimately mobilize and help improve the tissue quality of the pecs. Thoracic spine mobilization. This is a huge one. It was one of the key movements that we talked about. We definitely integrate a lot of T-spine mobilization into our program. It's something we've seen a lot of success with in helping players just in general in their deliveries, but especially when it comes to achieving arm layback. Scapular range of motion. We talked about scapular posterior tilt. We do have a lot, we have a ton of exercises focus on scapular range of motion, as it is very, very, very important to pitchers. But we do have some that are tailored at specifically scapular posterior tilt. Then posterior cuff, mainly focusing on the tissue quality. A lot of times we'll see pitchers that really struggle with getting that scapular posterior tilt or getting that external rotation. They feel a lot of tightness right here in the posterior cuff. So we'll do a lot, again, of lacrosse ball rolling or myofascial rolling, where we'll go ahead and diagnose and kind of hit that tissue there and ultimately improve the tissue quality. Shoulder mobilization. There's a lot of controversy out there that when talking about actually stretching into shoulder ER, but we will do a lot of mobilization exercises that will ultimately lend to having more shoulder external rotation as well as shoulder internal rotation. So those are essentially kind of the main mobility stuff that we'll kind of take a look at when it comes to improving the mobility and soft tissue in portions of the body that directly contribute into achieving arm layback. So this is kind of the list that we mainly focus on here when it comes to mobility. And again, when you guys submit an analysis with us, these are things that we will include in your mobility plan and probably address with you if you're struggling to achieve between that 160 and 190 degree range of arm layback. All right, guys, so in this last slide, the main thing I want to cover here are some of the other mechanical inefficiencies that will make it really, really hard for players to achieve that 160 to 190 degree range of arm layback later on in their delivery. So first things first is being late into arm flip up at front foot strike. So I covered this in another video, but ultimately when the player gets into front foot strike, we want the arm to be flipped up between a 45 to 90 degree range. For players that are below that 45 degree range, it becomes really difficult for, as they're beginning to rotate into arm acceleration, for them to slam back all the way into that 160 to 190 degree range. And notice I said slam, that's ultimately because that's what it is. And even if a player is able to achieve going from 0 degrees to 160 at the part of the delivery where arm layback is occurring, we find that it's very harsh on the arm, and it's actually going to lead to a lot of shoulder issues like impingements and stuff like that. So first things first, being late in arm flip up at front foot strike. If we see that, that's kind of a telltale sign. If a guy struggles with arm layback, we're going to have him work on this first. Next, arm being out of the shoulder plane. So this is another one we see time and time again. For guys that either have the arm really low and out of the shoulder plane, it's really hard for them to get back into that 160 to 190 degree range, or if they're too high. Ultimately, for players that are in the shoulder plane as they go into their arm acceleration phase, that's going to allow that rotational energy to be distributed through the body and into the arm so that we can have proper arm layback and get into that range that we're looking for. And then lastly, this one is what we kind of call falsified layback. And this is something we see with guys that have a pushy arm action. But we'll see with a lot of pros that when they get to arm layback, and I'll cover this, I'm going to do a full pro breakdown of Christian Javier right after this slide. And I cover this, but one thing that we like to see is that when arm layback is occurring, it's actually occurring when the elbow is behind the ear line. So it's actually occurring back here. We'll see guys that kind of get that fake layback. They're shooting the elbow out front of the arm, and for a portion in time, it looks like they're getting this crazy amount of arm layback. And really, it's just a result of them shooting the arm forward and pushing with the tricep. So if we see that where they're either shooting the elbow forward or up, we call that falsified layback. It's not true arm layback. And we'll definitely point that out on your mechanical evaluation if we see you doing that. So these are kind of the three main mechanical inefficiencies that we see lead to decreased layback or fake layback that we see in most players that submit analysis with us. So I have videos for pretty much each one of these. I'll actually link those underneath this video. But these are the main mechanical inefficiencies we see that lead to decreased arm layback. So now I'm gonna, in this next portion of the video, I'm gonna pretty much do a screen share with you guys, and I'm gonna do a full mechanical evaluation when it comes to the arm layback mechanic using the Astros pitcher Christian Javier. So I hope you guys enjoy that, and we really appreciate you watching. Thanks. All right, guys, so let's go ahead and take a look at a pro example. Here I have Christian Javier, and we're going to kind of look into each one of the mechanical inefficiencies that we would diagnose that would lead to a decreased range of arm layback. And again, we're going to look at Christian Javier here. So number one on the list is being late into arm flip up. So again, we want to be in between that 45 to 90 degree range. I talk about this in another video, but let's see where Christian Javier is at front foot strike. So we'll get him into front foot strike. And what do we see here? So we're particularly looking at his throwing arm and what being late would be. If he was late here, just to kind of recap, he would be somewhere below 45 degrees. So somewhere kind of like in there or below. So in that range there would mean that he's late with his arm into flip up, which would again make it harder to get all the way into that 160 degree or more, 160 to 190 degree range of arm layback as he begins to go into arm acceleration. So let's go ahead and see where Javier is here. So we'll draw a kind of flat line here, and then we'll draw up to the angle that matches his forearm. And we'll say he's somewhere in around the 70 degree range. So here I have him at 72, give or take. Could be 75, could be 70. But we can clearly see here that Christian Javier is obviously within that 45 to 90 degree range, meaning that he is on time with his arm flip up into front foot strike. So looking at mechanical inefficiency number one, we can clearly see that Christian Javier has passed and he does not have the mechanical inefficiency of being late into arm flip up. So let's go ahead and go to mechanical inefficiency 2 here. All right, guys, so let's go ahead and look at the second mechanical inefficiency that will lead to decreased arm layback. And that mechanical inefficiency is that our arm is not in the shoulder plane throughout the, essentially from the time we get to front foot strike through the portion of arm acceleration where we achieve maximal arm layback. So let's go ahead and get Christian Javier here into front foot strike on the right side of the screen. And we'll say he's about right there at front foot strike. And what do we observe here? If we draw a line through Javier's shoulders, we'll say that he's at about 6 degrees of tilt there, maybe 5 degrees of tilt. And we'll draw a line through the throwing arm and through the front shoulder. And what we want to observe is that he is within that same realm of tilt. We can clearly see that he's within a degree of 2 there. He's at about 5 degrees. I think his shoulders were at 5 or 6. So we can clearly see that his arm is within the shoulder plane at front foot strike. So let's go ahead and progress him into the position of arm layback here on the left side of the screen. And let's just ensure that when he achieves arm layback, so we're kind of looking, just so you guys understand, within this mechanical concept, we're looking that his arm is within his shoulder plane, usually between the time of front foot strike to when he achieves arm layback. Here we'll draw a line through Javier's shoulder line. You can see there he's at about 27 degrees. Now let's go ahead and draw a line through his arm and down through his shoulders, ensuring that we're kind of matching up there. We can clearly see that Christian Javier there is at that 27 degree range, meaning that his arm is within the shoulder plane, which is exactly what we're wanting to see with our athletes when we're doing a mechanical evaluation of them. So we can see here that Christian Javier does not possess the mechanical inefficiency of his arm being outside of the shoulder plane. Let's go ahead and take a look at mechanical inefficiency number 3. All right, guys, and the last usual mechanical inefficiency that we see is falsified layback or fake layback. And usually there's kind of 2 indicators of athletes that have falsified layback. And usually that's, first off, we'll take a look here on the left, that the elbow is shooting up above the ear. So kind of in both of these examples here, we'll just kind of draw a line straight out from the ear. We can see here that that's about where the ear line is. And you can clearly see that Javier's elbow, if we draw a line straight through it, is going to be below that line, indicating that ultimately he's not shooting that elbow up above this. Again, we want to see that the elbow is down below. If he were to be doing this incorrectly, what we would see is we would see that the elbow would be up here somewhere in this range, and we would then again we would see that, you know, obviously that elbow is up above the ear. And that's going to indicate, that's kind of going to, what it's going to do is it's ultimately going to make it look like there's this really high range of layback, probably 200 degrees or above. But really it's just falsified layback where the tricep is kind of pushing the arm through. And so you would see a kind of a crazy range of arm layback where we would get into like the 200-degree range. So we can clearly see here on this view that Javier is not doing that. Let's go ahead and take a look here on the right view just to ensure as well. And keep in mind in this angle, we're a little bit down low here. So he's probably a little lower than it appears here with the elbow. But again, we'll kind of draw a line through here, through the ear. So we'll say it's about right there, going through at 0 degrees. We can clearly see that if we kind of come down here and draw a line through where the elbow is, we're going to pretty much see that that line is going to be underneath the ear line. And then if we draw a line above, this is what we wouldn't want to see, where the elbow is kind of shooting up somewhere in this range. That would be a kind of a telltale sign that ultimately we are essentially getting fake layback, and we're kind of shooting that elbow forward and pushing with the tricep. So we can see Javier is good on that. Now, another thing that we look for is we want to ensure that arm layback is occurring behind the ear line in the horizontal realm. So what do I mean by that? So we can clearly see here that Javier's ear in the horizontal realm is kind of in this range right here. And where do we see his elbow? We can clearly see that his elbow is back, pretty far back here when he's achieving maximal arm layback. So we can see it's way back there. There's a clear indication that the elbow is behind the ear line there, indicating that he's not just pushing his arm through and ultimately getting that falsified layback. If we were to see the elbow somewhere up here, oftentimes that is a good indicator that we are getting that falsified layback or fake layback, and we're kind of getting a pushy arm action that's not going to ultimately be a telltale sign of true, arm layback and ultimately what we're trying to achieve. So that's just kind of a breakdown there of Christian Javier and kind of the 3 mechanical inefficiencies that we'll look for in athletes ultimately to diagnose somebody that's not going to be able to achieve arm layback, or if they're achieving fake layback. So hope you guys enjoyed this portion of this video, and hope you enjoyed this video altogether. And we appreciate you guys watching, and please subscribe to our YouTube channel if you haven't already done so for more mechanical explanation videos like this. Thanks.